Luffy versus Zoro is one of those debates that are always bound to happen, with Luffy being the main character of One Piece and Zoro seeming to be the second main character. It was only a matter of time until these two were put up against each other in an actual battle by the community. With that said, let's just be honest, Luffy isn't losing to any of his crewmates. And in today's video, we'll talk about exactly that. What's up guys, Gamblrr here, and today we've got kind of a different video. You guys probably already know how I make my versus battles, but this time we're not really trying to prove who wins in a battle. Instead, we're trying to see how one character compares to the other. Of course, for this video, we've got Luffy and Zoro. Luffy is stronger than Zoro. I don't think anyone unironically thinks otherwise, so instead, I'd like to know, is Luffy versus Zoro actually close? Let's find out. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and become a subscriber. You'll get more videos from me and we'll both be happy. Luffy is an outgoing, work on the fly guy, and while Zoro pretty much is the same to a certain extent, most times he acts as Luffy's stability. When Usopp leaves the crew back in Water 7, it's Zoro's stoic judgment that makes Luffy realize the weight of Usopp's bold decision. On the other hand, it's Luffy's nature that gets Zoro to join him on what is now a 2-year-plus journey to fulfill the dreams of everyone on the crew. It's this dynamic that makes Zoro being the right-hand man, the vice captain, and first mate make sense. Combine this with their rather unserious and serious fight back in Whiskey Peak, we have the seeds for a, in quotations, rivalry. Of course, they aren't rivals in the story at all, but from the fans' perspective, these two being compared to each other is warranted. And I would say to a certain extent, Oda would agree with this. Oda isn't the type to shy away from having Zoro stand next to Luffy and have them go blow for blow. These two are the first duo in One Piece, the only two conquerors on the crew, and the only supernova. The list goes on and on. With that said, even with the existence of these things, what's more apparent is that, when it comes down to it, Luffy is the clear superior. This has been the case basically the entire story. Oda goes out of his way to show us this by having Luffy fight the strongest and Zoro the second strongest. Just like many other things Oda implemented earlier in the story, these things still hold up to this day, 25 years later. If anything, we're currently seeing what is, in my opinion, the biggest gap between Luffy and Zoro to date in terms of portrayal. Luffy has just beaten the strongest creature in the world and became an emperor himself, and Zoro on the other hand went extreme diff and hockey bloomed against a first commander. Luffy just got done fighting an admiral and 5 elders, while Zoro the entire time was fighting Lucci, someone Luffy took zero interest in and never took seriously. Now, it's not to say that Zoro is relative to any of these characters I'm talking about. Zoro would mid-diff king if they were to fight again, and the same goes for Lucci, but the fact of the matter is, nothing Zoro has done even compares to the weight of Luffy's actions in the past 100 chapters or so. Anyways, let's move on from this talk because it sounds like I'm trying to slander Zoro, which I'm not. So let's talk about how this video will go. I'm going to go over every stat I can think of, just like the average power scaling TikTok, and we'll keep score to figure out if Luffy versus Zoro as a whole is even close. Got it? Well, let's get into it, starting with strength. Luffy as early as Whole Cake Island was overpowering a first commander outright. Whenever he entered Gear 4, Luffy was doing the damage, and one can argue he was doing significant damage, even at the beginning of the fight, before he had a hockey bloom. The reason I bring this up is because he entered Wano and found out firsthand that just punching isn't going to cut it anymore. When he fought Kaido for the first time, not a single attack hurt him. Blunt force just isn't enough going forward. And so after getting one shot, Luffy went on to learn Wano's Ryo, or what we like to call advanced armament hockey, which gives access to durability negation. Once Luffy used this on Kaido, everyone around him was shook, not only because of the fact that he damaged Kaido, but also because of the new hockey that literally no one except Zoro had access to. After chapters of using this technique, Luffy hockey blooms and realizes that advanced armament hockey isn't gonna cut it either. His attacks were still too shallow for a beast like Kaido, so he started using advanced Conqueror's hockey. These were dealing heavier blows to Kaido, but then we find out that this still wasn't enough because Kaido goes on to just outright beat him once again, saying his use of the technique was just sloppy, that he's just not him. So after Luffy gets some Grubhub, like he always does, he comes back to the rooftop even stronger, managing to split the sky with the strongest creature. This was in base, and we find out Luffy can combine his gears with his newfound haki, and when he does, he actually goes blow for blow with Kaido until he dies to an off-guard attack. And then Luffy comes back stronger again, unlocking Gear 5, another clear stat increase, to which Luffy again goes blow for blow with Kaido, but to an even greater extent. The nail in the coffin was Gamblrr Gun, an attack that when Kaido decided to face head on, he got overpowered and ultimately just lost. That is where Luffy's strength lies, as well as the peak of it. So where does Zoro compare? Zoro on the rooftop was actually out there cooking. He was able to damage Kaido same as Luffy with his advanced armament haki. I compare the two because despite the gnarly cut he created on his scales, Kaido basically brushes the thing off and never talks about it again. But then before Luffy haki blooms, Zoro used his Ashura. This attack was crazy because not only did it reopen Oden's scar that literally no swordman can do in the past 20 years, but also Zoro was critically injured. We know this had to do with Conqueror's haki, and this will be important in a second because Zoro goes on to fight King. King the entire fight is cooking Zoro, but not only just because he's stronger than him, but also Zoro is fighting against his own sword, Enma. Enma had not accepted Zoro as an owner yet, and so Zoro decided he would use everything to get that ownership, eventually haki blooming and unlocking advanced Conqueror's haki. From there, Zoro just ends up cooking King because not only does he have insane AP now, but he also found out how to get through to King as his defenses are lower when his flames are off. A little earlier I said that the fact that Ashura was Conqueror's haki is important, and I say that because we just got confirmation that the attack he used on King was the pinnacle of his swordsmanship. It's the strongest thing he's ever done, and so that would include the Ashura that reopened Oden's scar. That serves as the peak of Zoro's strength, and so with that, let's compare it to Luffy. I think we can all agree that Zoro would easily be able to replicate what Oden did in his fight 20 years ago. The thing is, Luffy was already at that level when he unlocked advanced Conqueror's haki, and if not, when he came back and split the skies with Kaido, he definitely was. Luffy then goes on to stack this power on top of his Gear 5, and then his pinnacle eclipses anything Zoro has ever done, with Gamblrr Gun just outright overpowering Kaido's strongest attack. We've got Zoro and Luffy equaling each other before Gear 4 and at Zoro's peak when being super charitable to Zoro, and then Luffy unlocks an awakening that multiplies his strength, and then his peak is even stronger than that. That's one for Luffy. Speed is up next, and so let's get into Luffy's. Luffy, like I said earlier, got humbled by Kaido, and in the process of this, Kaido blitzed him in base. Now I always used to slander this feat because of a certain agenda, but jokes aside, this isn't Luffy at his peak. He was super angry, and so there was literally no way he was able to use Future Sight, like he goes on to do almost 80 chapters later. In chapter 1001, Kaido tries to blitz Luffy the same exact way as before, but this time Luffy is calm and uses Future Sight. Though Luffy still gets hit because Kaido is just faster than his Future Sight, he dodges it way better than he did back in the Flower Capital. It's funny though because this is a trend we see over and over again with a ton of characters, their movements and speeds just being faster in named attacks. This is especially true with the other combatant, but as for Luffy, we see him just unable to contend with Hybrid Kaido until he uses advanced Conqueror's haki. That's when Luffy starts being able to put the beast on Kaido without Kaido just letting him do it, like he'd been doing for the past 10 chapters. Luffy loses again, but comes back even stronger and starts competing with Kaido again. Kaido gets drunk and gets even faster and stronger, to which Luffy compensates with better haki usage and his gears. And then Luffy comes back even faster with Gear 5. The reason Gear 5 is likely faster than Gear 4 Snake Man is because of what he does in Egghead. Luffy fights Kizaru, the fastest admiral, and Kizaru is able to deal with Snake Man easily, despite probably not having Future Sight. Kaido on the other hand needed Future Sight to adapt to it, and here we have this guy doing it while having a conversation. And then Kizaru literally just blitzes Snake Man without a named attack. However, when Luffy goes into Gear 5, despite Kizaru's nerf, he's actually able to hit him, unlike Snake Man. This all gives credence to Luffy's crazy speed, with Gear 5 just being faster than everything he did before that landed many hits on Kaido, even blissing him at times. And so, does Zoro compare? No. I was talking about named attacks making you faster, and this is crazy true for Zoro. He actually kind of blitzed Kaido in 10-10. Of course, Kaido wasn't trying in the slightest and becomes many times stronger during his fight with Luffy, but Ashura isn't the peak of Zoro's speed. The peak was of course Dragon Damnation, to which it literally blisses King with his flames off in the air. This is as far as it goes, with Zoro not really having anything else to show for his base speed. I mean, he was outspeeding Big Mom on the rooftop, but at this point, Luffy can do that casually in base without Conqueror's Haki. Another point for Luffy. Durability and endurance is next, and this is quite the controversial topic because of how Luffy's body works. Luffy is a rubber boy, so his body actually has a higher chance of getting damaged by slashes than regular humans. We see Kaido take advantage of this while he's in Gear 5, and it actually damages him, but who are we to gauge his durability by looking at his literal weak point? I really need you guys to understand how crazy Luffy's endurance was in Wano. First off, when Luffy eats, he comes back to full health. That's just how he operates. And so when he came back in 1026, he was fresh. Kaido went on to put the beast on him, of course blow for blow, but for 20 chapters. Keep in mind, Kaido was hitting him with attacks while just in hybrid, but then he gets drunk and starts hitting Luffy with stronger attacks, to which Luffy himself says out loud that his haki is growing stronger. Then Luffy gets hit off guard by this drunken superpowered Kaido, and we know firsthand the crazy extent being off guard nerfs your defenses, as you can't really defend against the attack coming at you. So Luffy literally dies in that moment, and then comes back in Gear 5 acting like nothing happened. He goes on to fight Kaido again, take heavy blows, and win the fight, all while still in the same state as when he died, just pushing through it, showing his endurance. Now, hearing all this, you might think Zoro stands no chance, but actually, I think he does. Zoro actually has super endurance, and not many people talk about this. He broke a ton of bones when he blocked Kaido in Big Mom's attack, got up and went on to scar Kaido. This was an insane feat. Only a few people can break a ton of bones and continue to fight, and Zoro just did it casually. He goes on to fight King at full strength, but after it, his drug wears off and he has to endure twice the damage of his bones breaking, and Zoro still ends up surviving. Insane stuff from Zoro, but obviously none of it surpasses fighting after you died, so give that point to Luffy. Next up is hacks, and I don't really think we have to talk about this too much. Luffy has the advanced version of all three haki, the effects of Gear 2, 3, and 4, and then the most ridiculous powers in Gear 5. Give Luffy his point. IQ and Battle IQ is next, and this one is actually funny. Zoro obviously takes it in the IQ department, so that's a point for him. But Battle IQ is another thing. Zoro is a simpleton. I remember a couple years ago, I used to make fun of Zoro's Battle IQ to my friend because of what he was doing in Dressrosa. When he saw Pika, the man's grand scheme was to come up with 5 different plans that all made no sense and were doomed from the beginning. And Zoro made note of this. He literally ran through 4 of the 5 of them and realized they suck. And so what was his conclusion? Cut harder. Jokes aside, he does find out King's weakness, but that was after he told himself King might be a fishman.
This one. What?
Luffy on the other hand isn't great either. The guy went against a Lunarian and decided, okay, you're invincible with your flames on, so I'm going to continue attacking you. At least Zoro wasn't dumb enough to do this. He literally tells himself it's no use attacking while his flames are on. I'm sorry man, but I'm gonna have to give Zoro both the points here. I guess the next thing we could talk about is all 3 hakis, but we already concluded that Luffy's is just better. He has all 3 colors advanced, with his Conqueror's Haki just being superior, as well as maybe his Armament Haki. But to cut Zoro some slack, I'll give him Armament and Luffy the other 2. So at the end of the video, Luffy beats out Zoro with 6 stats to Zoro's 3. Luffy took all the important stats, taking strength, speed, durability, hacks, Conqueror's Haki, and observation Haki. Zoro on the other hand took battle IQ, regular IQ, and armament hockey to half Luffy's score. As you could tell by the way I directly compare these two in stats, I don't think the fight is as close as other people think it is. Luffy would most likely beat Zoro in base with Conqueror's Haki, let alone any of his gears, and especially Gear 5. Gear 5 is for the top tiers, the Yonkos, the Admirals, and clearly Zoro isn't a Yonko tier fighter. Not yet at least. And that's okay because he doesn't need to be just yet. So with that said, what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you for getting to the end of the video. Subscribe if you want more. And I'll catch y'all in the next one.